There are many beliefs of what the realm of hell is like for the sinners who end up there after death. The one that this story takes place in is one very few would imagine it would be like. Instead of a basking inferno that tortures and punishes every sinner equally, the Pride Ring isn't too different from the world of the living. There are cities, commerce, currency, radios, televisions, internet, and citizens who run the whole machine like a functional capitalist society. And like a capitalist society, only the strong and cunning can prosper, while the weak and unlucky suffer. The sinners who manage to climb up the ranks are known as overlords. Their power comes from the souls they own through deals they trick or force other sinners into making. To keep the power they accrue, overlords must exert their power over everyone else, either through force or influence, or even a little bit of both. And that's what three of the most powerful overlords did together. The first was Velvette, a short woman with brown skin and large pink hair laced with strands of navy blue and white. Her rise came through the power of social media. With her wit, her technological know-how, and her determination, she managed to amass a sphere of influence over the denizens of hell. Of the three overlords she was a part of, she was considered the least cruel. Least, but cruel nonetheless. The next was Vox, a man who had a TV for a head and was entirely made of electrical cables and metal. No semblance of his past organic self was left. He was, for all intents and purposes, a machine. His specialty was, as his appearance indicated, entertainment and surveillance. Nearly every resident who was connected to Hell's internet could be surveyed and even influenced to think from his point of view. His company's slogan, "Trust Us," summed up his shtick. And the last was Valentino. He was the tallest of the trio with purple skin and a moth-like appearance, even having two large insect wings that doubled as a coat when they weren't in use. His specialty was porn. In his previous life, he was an adult film director. After his passing, he brought that talent to hell in full force, becoming the largest creator of adult videos in the Pride Ring. Lust was a deadly sin on its own, but when you mix it with a concoction of greed, wrath, pride, and a dash of the other sins, what you got was a man drunk on his power. He was always the dominant force, both in work and in pleasure. His subordinates were always the submissive part of the equation, even going to great lengths to keep it that way. Manipulation, drugs, physical harm, everything was on the table for him to use to maintain control, and that was certainly what made him the cruelest of the bunch. Together, they formed the V's. With their combined power, they controlled the largest chunk of hell through media, influence, and violence if necessary. At times, it felt like they were unstoppable, able to take on the other prominent overlords to expand their power. But little did they know, an unexpected turn of events would change those plans. For now, the three of them relaxed within Valentino's penthouse atop their tower after a long day of work.
What a fine day in hell, wouldn't you agree?
Just felt like another day, honestly.
Oh, come on! The updates to our software have proven to increase user retention by at least 50%. That's most certainly a reason to be happy. I wonder how dear old Alastor will be able to handle this.
Careful, you don't want to get ahead of yourself.
What? You don't think it'll work?
Just stating an obvious factor that shouldn't be overlooked. He did humiliate you after his grand return after all.
Well, this time will be different. You'll see. Everyone will see.
I look forward to seeing it. What about you, Val? Heard there was some trouble at the studio today.
It was nothing. I got it handled.
Really? Because from what I've heard, Angel Dust's been dropping the ball ever since...
I said I got it handled. I gave that ungrateful whore a good discipline session after we finished the shoot.
Alright, just wanted to make sure every gear of the machine is working properly.
Are you saying I'm the third wheel of this group? That I'm not pulling my own weight?
Whoa, Val, she was just...
And you? Do I look like a broken tool to you?
No, it's just...
It's just what?
Nothing.
That's right. Now, I don't want to hear any more talk about how I should be running my department. I'm doing my part, and you all should be doing yours. Can you do that?
Yeah, sure. Whatever you say.
Of course.
Good. Now, enough talk about work. Let's just unwind with a good little... Huh?
Huh?
God fucking damn it! I thought I told those useless technicians to keep those fuse boxes maintained!
Guess it shows you have poor hiring standards.
Hey! Weren't you bitching about how useless your models were a few weeks ago?
What the hell is this? A hell shake?
Hell shakes aren't real.
Then how do you explain this? Huh?
The V's got up from the couch as more light bulbs popped above them.
What in all of hell is going on?
Surges of electricity arched from the broken bulbs and converged onto a singular point several meters away from the V's. It intensified until it formed into a floating ball of blue energy. The rumbling grew larger until it reached a crescendo as the ball suddenly dispersed. When the V's regained their balance, they saw the ball of energy had formed into a portal. A moment later, the one who opened it emerged.
Huh?
Okay.
It was a human, not a sinner. A living, breathing human man. And he was huge. Very tall, with bulky muscles all over his body, all of which was covered by green metallic armor, except for his exposed biceps. Attached to his left wrist was what looked to be a large retractable blade. On his left shoulder was a small cannon-like gadget, and his face was concealed behind the translucent visor of a helmet. But even from where they stood, the V's could make out the eyes of the human. They were eyes that sheared with a piercing anger. Whoever he looked at seemed to be marked for death, and when his eyes landed on the V's, they all felt threatened.
Who the hell are you and what are you doing here?
The human didn't respond. He only stared at Valentino before someone else emerged from the portal. But none of the V's could see who it was with the human in the way. A moment later, the portal dissipated. The human took a step to his left to reveal who the last arrival was.
What the... Miss Morningstar?
Indeed it was Charlie Morningstar, the Princess of Hell and the owner of the Hazbin Hotel.
Hello again, Valentino. I hope my arrival hasn't interrupted anything important for your business.
Something was wrong, Valentino thought. Charlie wasn't acting like the naive and clumsy schoolgirl who nearly burned down Valentino's studio by accident several weeks ago. Right now, she seemed composed, cool, level-headed. She even had a little smirk on the edge of her lip as she stared at him.
What the fuck are you doing here in my crib? Moreover, who the hell is this cosplaying bodybuilder reject you brought with you?
Oh, don't mind him. He's just a friend of mine who wanted to accompany me to ensure my visit proceeded without too many complications. As for why I'm here, I believe the terms we left off on during our last encounter were unsatisfactory.
Are you here because of angel dust?
That's right.
You can't be serious. Have I not made it clear that I have ownership of his soul? It is my right to do whatever I want with him, even if it means pulling him away from your pathetic little games for 3-year-olds.
That is true, but he is also a guest of the Hazbin Hotel. And as the owner of the hotel, it is my duty to ensure the safety and well-being of my guests. And I've noticed my guest has not had the best sense of well-being as of late.
Charlie's smirk disappeared, and her eyes narrowed.
To that end, I've concluded that it is in everyone's best interest for us to renegotiate Angel Dust's contract.
What?
Are you fucking serious?
Very. So, here's my proposal, Valentino. Either you give me permission to add a clause into Angel Dust's contract to ensure no physical harm can be enacted on him by the owning party, or...
Her eyes turned red, and her hair slowly levitated behind her.
You release him of his contract. We forgive all previous transgressions and move forward without any further complications between either party. I await your answer.
Valentino was speechless. The clumsy girl who nearly burned down his studio was standing in the middle of his penthouse threatening him. And from her burning gaze, she looked like she was willing to follow through with her threat, made more apparent when Val heard something. He glanced over at the bulking human slowly popping his knuckles. His eyes still bore the piercing gaze, telling Valentino he should consider his response wisely. But what was this human really capable of? The muscles and the mean look could all be a bluff to force him to surrender without a fight. That was something that Valentino could not do. Any sign of compromise or adherence would show he was fallible and could be taken on, either by other overlords or even the common sinner looking to move up the demonic ranks. There was nothing for it. He had no choice. But he also realized there was an opportunity that he and his partners in crime could take with this situation.
Fox, set up the cameras.
What?
I said, set up the cameras. I want every lowlife scum in this shithole to know what happens here tonight. Got it?
Yeah, I got it.
With a snap of his fingers, surges of electricity flowed from the broken sockets and materialized into a dozen cameras lining every angle of Valentino's penthouse.
Val, I'm sorry. I'm...
What is wrong with you?
Nothing, Val. I swear, there's nothing wrong.
Really? Because that shoot took an hour longer than it needed to be.
Whoa!
You're breaking my heart, Angel Cakes. I made you a star, and this is how you repay me?
I'm really sorry, Val. I don't know what came over me. I guess I just had a bad day. We all have those once in a while, right?
I don't have room in my schedule for bad days. It costs me more than just my time and money. You know what I think, Angel? I think you're still having thoughts about your little princess, aren't you?
Val! Please!
Well, I'm going to make this very clear. She won't be saving you. And I'm not just talking about these shoots. Her little redemption cult you've joined up with is nothing but a hoax. There is no redemption for you, Angel. You are brought down here for a reason. Even if by some butt-fucking miracle you manage to clean up your act and become some goody little two-shoe Boy Scout and chastise yourself, guess what? You're still stuck here with me. You're just going to have to realize that you're not going anywhere. The sooner you accept that, the sooner I'll stop hurting you more than necessary. Am I clear?
Yes!
Yes. What?
Yes! Valentino!
All right, Angel. I believe you. But I'm still pretty upset about tonight. So I have one final request. On the rack. Now!
When Angel got back to the hotel, he didn't speak to anyone. He just hightailed it to his room, locked the door, and crashed onto his bed.
Fuck you, Valentino!
It took him nearly an hour to cry most of the pain away. With the little mental energy he had left, all he could do was scroll through his Voxgram feed until his body gave way and allowed him to escape the pain of consciousness. But that wasn't going to happen tonight.
Huh? What's this? What the fuck?
Angel! Angel! You better come see this.
Vaggie? Is this about...
It's on the television. Come on.
Whoa!
Vaggie took Angel's hand and pulled him down the hall all the way to the lobby. Everybody else had gathered around the hotel's television. Pentious, Nifty, Husk, Raz, Daz, and even Alastor. Vaggie took her seat on the end of the couch and put Angel in the middle with Husk on the other end. On the screen, it was showing the same thing that was on Angel's phone. The three V's stood in their penthouse in a standoff against Charlie Morningstar.
What the fuck is she doing over there? I thought I told her to let this go!
I would educate a guest that she has found a golden opportunity to use her authority as the Princess of Hell in a productive manner. This ought to be exciting, especially with whomever her new compatriot is.
Angel and the other guests finally took notice of the large human who stood beside Charlie. However, their shared question of who this man was would have to wait when the camera focused on Valentino. He pointed directly at Charlie.
Charlotte Morningstar. You think you can just barge into my humble home and make threats to take away what is rightfully mine? Well, I'm sorry to say, but my answer is no. I will not make any alterations or relinquish my ownership of Angel Dust's soul. He is my property, and I will do what I please with him.
Valentino looked at the camera, almost as if he was looking directly at Angel through the screen. Valentino reached one of his four hands into his coat and casually pulled out a carbine pistol. But instead of taking aim at Charlie or the human, he simply held it up for the camera to get a good look at it.
Furthermore, as punishment for your threats, once the three of us are finished with whoever this lapdog of yours is, we will personally march to your pitiful hotel, slaughter every resident that resides there, reclaim what is rightfully mine, and bring him back where he belongs. All of that before we burn that pitiful building into a smoldering pile of ash to be forgotten as a footnote in Hell's history. Anyone who fucks with the V's will know they're fucking with the best.
Hey.
Angel felt a furry hand take hold of one of his left hands. He looked over at Husk and felt him place his other hand onto Angel's shoulder.
Just take it easy.
Vaggie did the same on his right side.
In and out. In and out.
Angel managed to keep himself from hyperventilating, but he still felt incredibly nervous. When he looked over at Husk and Vaggie, he could tell they were nervous too, but there was nothing any of them could do except to sit back and see what happened next. Charlie continued to stare at Valentino with her burning red gaze, but she eventually closed her eyes and bent her head down. She opened her eyes again. They weren't burning red anymore, but they carried the look of stern anger instead of burning anger.
Very well. I had hoped that we could reach an agreement that would not result in further conflict. Alas, my duty to ensure the safety and well-being of my guests is my priority. And I will carry it out, no matter the circumstances. Mr. Doomslayer?
The human turned his head to look down at Charlie.
You have my permission to rip and tear until it is done.
Charlie walked to a corner of the room and sat down on a nearby chair. The Slayer turned his head to look directly at the V's again. He reached behind him and, from seemingly nowhere, a large shotgun appeared in his hand. The way he held his weapon and the look in his eyes told Val he was ready for a fight. Well, by golly, the V's were going to give him one. Val looked over at Vox and then Velvette. They both nodded and looked over at the Slayer, with faces showing they were going to squish this human and show the princess who the real bosses of hell were. Val put the rest of his arms within his coat and pulled out 3 more guns that have all of his hands holding a firearm. Vox held up his hand and jolts of electricity surged around it. Meanwhile, Velvette held out her hand and a smolder of red energy emanated from her palm. The V's were ready. The Slayer brought up his weapon.
What?
What the?
Yeah! What the?
Don't just stand there, Fox! Get him! How the fuck is he doing that?
The V's unleashed their fury, but the Slayer evaded every single one of their attacks. He zipped around the room and fired his weapon every time he had an opening.
You die already!
It was an elegant dance that combined his feet, his shotgun, his heavy cannon, sticky grenades, and even his fists. All the while the penthouse was wrecked piece by piece. The dance continued until the Slayer found himself on a collision course with Vox. The Overlord frantically unleashed a blast of electricity, but the Slayer sidestepped it and closed the distance with a dash. The Slayer took a hold of Vox by the neck, but instead of punching him on the screen like he planned, the Slayer saw Valentino getting up from the ground, getting ready to open fire on him again. So, the Slayer threw Vox across the room, and he crashed right into Valentino. The Slayer turned his attention to Velvette. She pulled her hands back and unleashed a red shockwave right at him. But the Slayer used a damaged piece of furniture to springboard himself over the wave and land right behind Velvette. Before she could react, the Slayer landed a hard right hook across her face, followed by a left, and then a heavy kick right under her chin. Because of her smaller frame, she was launched across the room, slamming into the door at the end. If she didn't have the powers of an Overlord, her head would have been knocked clean off her shoulders. She managed to get to her feet, but as soon as the painful haze cleared from her aching head, she felt something clasp to her waist. She saw it was a metal claw, which was attached to a metal chain. She looked up to see the Slayer riding the chain coming right at her. But what terrified Velvette was what the chain was being retracted into.
Oh shit!
The blast from the Doomslayer's double-barrel super shotgun launched Velvette through the door and out of sight. After the Slayer quickly loaded a fresh pair of shells into his weapon, he looked back to see Vox had gotten to his feet and was about to unleash an even more powerful electrical blast. Instinctively, the Slayer ran through the door and jumped as the explosion erupted behind him. The Slayer landed onto the floor in a crouched position. He looked up to see he had leapt off a stairway balcony and landed right in the middle of a fashion studio. Wardrobes of dresses and rolls of fabric lined the room. When he stood up, the Slayer watched as Valentino and Vox emerged from the large hole in the wall where the door used to be. Only, Valentino was flying now. He opened his coat to reveal his wings. He flew out of the hole and hovered in the air near the high ceiling. Meanwhile, Vox surged over the balcony in electrical form and rematerialized on the same floor as the Slayer. All 3 combatants stared at each other in a standoff, waiting for their opponent to make the first move. The Slayer was quicker on the draw as he put a precision bolt right into Vox's shoulder. But the Slayer immediately dashed away when Valentino unleashed a new attack. He spat out globs of red smoke that puffed into clouds when they hit the floor. The Slayer kept his distance from the smoke, knowing it was most likely toxic, caustic, or both. Valentino flew around the high ceiling, unleashing a barrage of bullets from his guns. But the Slayer was still too fast for Val to get a clear shot. Meanwhile, the Slayer unleashed a barrage of bullets of his own to keep Val off balance.
Whoa!
During that time, Vox had recovered and morphed into his electrical form. He surged towards the Slayer, hoping to get a good electrical punch on him. But when he materialized ready to strike, the Slayer already turned to face him with his super shotgun in hand. Vox was thrown back a good distance with a gashing wound in his chest. Before he could recover, he felt a sudden cold envelop him. The Slayer had launched an ice grenade from his shoulder cannon and stuck Vox right in place. He then dashed out of the way to avoid another volley of smoking bullets from Valentino. After evading the last puff of smoke, the Slayer got a bead on the Moth Demon and put a precision bolt right into Val's chest. Val shuddered, struggling to keep himself airborne. When he did, he felt something latch onto him. He looked down to see the Slayer's meat hook clasped to his waist, along with the chain that pulled the Slayer towards him. Like with Velvette, the Slayer pulled the trigger and unleashed a blast of buckshot right into Val's gut. Val was thrown back, causing him to drop his guns and slam into the large window overlooking the city. He put his hands on the window to stay airborne and gain his bearings, but when he did, he was mortified by what he saw. It turned out the Slayer managed to perform a trick move to pull out his rocket launcher, lock Val in his sights, and unleash a trio of homing explosives before he even landed onto the floor. Val was blown through the window and was sent careening and screaming down the side of the building. But there wasn't time for the Slayer to go after him to confirm the kill. Vox had managed to break free of the ice.
Alright, big boy. Try this on for size.
He raised his hands and electricity surged from his whole body. From above, bolts of lightning shot down onto the floor. But once again, the Slayer quickly and fluidly evaded the barrage. He maneuvered his way across the room until he jumped up from a piece of rubble into the air. He then pulled out his super shotgun and fired his lead hook at the stationary Vox. But when the Slayer closed the distance, instead of firing his gun, he pulled his fist back and unleashed a brutal blood punch right into the Overlord's chest. Vox was launched across the room and crashed through the doors on the other side. The Slayer was about to give chase, but he stopped when he heard something behind him.
Fucking bastard.
Velvette emerged from a pile of rubble. She looked dreadful. Her hair was ruffled all over her face. She was hunched over, clasping her chest, which was entirely drenched in blood. But when she looked up, her face of pain morphed into a face of burning anger.
You ruined my dress!
A blast of black and red energy erupted around her. When it cleared, Velvette was levitating off the ground, and her whole body was encased in a black aura. The only discernible feature was her crimson eyes that leered hard on the Slayer. The red energy then formed into a crimson dress. Then all around her, black shadows appeared on the ground, which formed into humanoid figures. They all shared the same size and shape as Velvette, only they had no faces or hair. They were mannequins. Each of them wore a different dress, dresses that were rejects of Velvette's fashion line. Each of them held a pair of daggers, ready to attack. In response, the Slayer stretched out his arms, limbering himself up for the fight. Velvette unleashed a red shockwave, which the Slayer evaded easily. When he came out of the dash, a pair of mannequins charged him. The Slayer easily dispatched them with a shotgun blast and a slash of his blade. The Slayer evaded another shockwave from Velvette, and once again dispatched another pair of mannequins. But before Velvette could send another shockwave, the Slayer pulled out his heavy cannon, now with the micro-missile attachment on, and unleashed a volley of tiny explosives at her. Eventually, the explosions completely depleted her aura, leaving her vulnerable. The Slayer closed the distance and took advantage of it. The Slayer's blade went right into Velvette's gut, Before the Slayer could do more damage, Velvette was able to force it out and push the Slayer back with a burst of energy. Velvette clasped her gaping wound. She unleashed another blast of energy. The wound in her gut closed, but only temporarily. The blast sent out bolts of energy that struck the rolls of fabric on the walls. They unfurled and attached themselves to Velvette's dress. A second later, her dress had 4 long appendages attached, almost acting like tendrils. At the very tip of them, razor-sharp angelic daggers shined. Around her, another wave of mannequins emerged from the floor. Her eyes narrowed on the Slayer.
You like to play rough? Fine by me!
The Slayer responded by raising his hand and gesturing at her to bring it on. Velvette went on the offensive. She lurched forward and swung her tendrils at her opponent. The Slayer dashed away while Velvette's minions closed in too. But the Slayer gracefully cut them down and never took a hit from either Velvette or her minions. Eventually, the Slayer got a beat on Velvette and stuck a sticky grenade right on her. Her aura took the brunt of the explosion, but was weakened greatly. Regardless, she got fed up and recklessly moved in for a sweeping attack with her tendrils. The Slayer easily sidestepped it and moved in to unleash another blood punch right into Velvette's face. Her aura was broken, and she was launched off her feet. She crashed into one of the nearby pillars. She fought the disorienting pain, but the Slayer was already on her again. This time, the Slayer didn't stab her in the gut. Instead, he aimed higher, right into her right eye. The shock of the pain left her practically paralyzed, but not for long. She clasped the blade protruding from her eye, and in another burst of energy, forced it out and threw the Slayer back. Velvette clasped her destroyed eye socket and screamed through her teeth. Her remaining eye opened and locked onto the Slayer with a glare that indicated that she was going to destroy her opponent.
That's it! You will die!
She didn't hold anything back. Her tendril attacks, her shockwaves, and her charging minions sent the Slayer on the defensive. The Slayer evaded each of her attacks and took care of her minions, but he ran out of room to maneuver. Her next tendril attack forced the Slayer into the open, and she managed to hit him with a shockwave. He was thrown back and collided into one of the pillars. Velvette's tendrils lashed out again, but instead of slicing him, they quickly snaked around his wrists and boots. The Slayer tried to move, but the tendrils held him in place. Velvette floated down towards the restrained Slayer with her remaining eye locked on him. She would have gladly thrown him around the room to tenderize him before the kill, but she exerted nearly all of her demonic strength just to restrain him. Her face was now only 3 feet away from his helmet.
I don't know how that bitch got you to do her dirty work, but all 3 of us will enjoy tormenting her and her colleagues after I reduce you to nothing but ash to be scattered on the wind. And after we find your soul here after you die, we will be sure to ensure true pain and suffering for your eternity of damnation.
The aura around Velvette's body flowed to her arms, leaving her battered body exposed. The black energy shifted into her hands, which shook with the power she was about to unleash. She pulled her hands back, ready to strike.
Yeah!
But little did Velvette know, the Slayer had one last surprise for her. The Slayer's flame belch erupted from his shoulder cannon right into Velvette's vulnerable face. She flinched and prematurely dispersed the energy she built up. In that moment, her grip on the Slayer's limbs loosened enough for him to free his arm. In a fluid motion, the Slayer cut the remaining tendrils and freed himself. Before Velvette can bring her aura back up to protect herself, the Slayer retracted his blade and landed a devastating blood uppercut square on her chin. She was launched into the air, tumbling end over end until she slammed into the wall above, before falling onto the floor with pieces of debris falling on top of her. The rest of Velvette's minions moved in on the Slayer, but rather than perform another dance with them, the Slayer casually pulled out his ballista, charged it up, and right when they were on top of him, unleashed a destroyer blade that bisected every remaining mannequin. A silence befell the room. It lasted 5 seconds before it was broken by the sound of moving rubble. Velvette slowly emerged from the pile of rubble. It took what remained of her strength and several failed attempts to stand up. Her remaining eye was blackened, and she was missing at least 3 teeth behind her swollen lips. Her body was shaking, and her breathing was erratic, like she was on the verge of death. She tried to take a step forward, but collapsed onto her hands and knees. She looked up to see the Slayer looking down at her. The look in his eyes were the same as they were at the beginning of the fight, but Velvette felt a sense of mockery from him. With the tiniest shred of what remained of her strength, she channeled one last spark of energy into her fist, and screamed as she leapt up for one last attack. Her scream was cut short when she felt the familiar feeling of metal meeting her gut, but something was off. She heard a new noise. She looked up to see the Slayer holding his chainsaw, with the blade held up against her abdomen. When she stared into the Slayer's piercing gaze, she felt something she never imagined she would ever feel again. Fear. She thought of how she was at the top of Hell's food chain not an hour ago. She had always been at the top, insulting and demeaning her employees and disrespecting the other overlords to display her superiority. But now, she knew what it felt like to be at the mercy of someone who truly had power over her. And unluckily for her, there would be no mercy to come from the Doomslayer. Velvette's body was launched into the air and landed onto the floor in 2 halves, a top and a bottom. Her body twitched with what little life was left, and her remaining blood spilled onto the floor. Her remaining eyes stared lifelessly ahead, while her face was frozen with disbelief and painful terror. The Slayer put his chainsaw away and walked over to examine the body of his fallen opponent. The Slayer looked up to see Charlie standing on the balcony that led to the penthouse. She applauded with a smile on her face before giving him an approving thumbs up. The Slayer reached behind him and pulled out a coin. Similar to the ones he used to slay the Hell Priest of his world, only this one was forged with the angelic steel of her world. He dropped the coin onto Velvette's body. A second later, it vanished. Velvette's corpse discolored, and the twitching stopped. All signs of life after death in her body were gone. Velvette's soul was extinguished.
Ooh! This is one bad boy.
One overload down already. I wasn't optimistic about this at first, but now...
That guy might be able to pull this off.
For the residents of the hotel, watching the battle unfold was like watching a sports game back in the living world. Only, the teams were fighting to the literal death, and the victor would determine the fate of everyone in the room Angel sat in. That made him nervous, especially when Velvette seemed to get the upper hand. But when the Slayer turned the tables and kicked the V's asses, Angel felt moments of pure cathartic triumph, especially when he saw Valentino blown up through the window. But everyone in hell knew that wasn't the end of him or Vox. This Doomslayer was going to have to get up close and personal to truly finish them off like he did with Velvette. And speaking of which...
Are you sure you don't know anything about this guy, Vaggie?
I swear, I never heard anything about a human who has the strength to slay overlords.
And yet here he is, accompanying Princess Morningstar in her efforts to topple 3 of them. Intriguing! Seems she's had a change in her character upon meeting this fellow.
But when? When and where did she meet this Doomslayer?
Well, I don't know where. But I remember one night a week ago, Charlie said she needed to take a walk because she couldn't sleep. Then she was in bed with me when I woke up the next morning.
That would explain when, but where and how.
Look! The battle isn't over yet!
The speculation would have to wait. With one overlord down, it was time to go after the next one. Luckily for the Slayer, which one to choose was obvious. From the door Vox was punched through, several robots emerged. Normally, Vox's robo-imps would be walking around serving the 3 overlords, but these robots were larger and resembled hellhounds. Their bodies glowed with blue lights, while their eyes glowed a threatening red, accompanied by sharp teeth and claws. One of them stepped forward, and Vox's voice spoke through it.
It turns out, we at VoxTech aren't just interested in providing entertainment and recreational products to our new customers. We've also been investing in combat robot models in case dire circumstances arise. And for that, I thank you, Mr. Doomslayer, for giving us the opportunity to field test our first line of prototypes.
Several hounds stood upright and pulled out guns, while others displayed their sharp teeth and claws.
If you're hell-bent on vanquishing the V's, then I invite you to face me within my personal lair down below. If you can make it, I guarantee you'll be given a worthy fight before your inevitable death. Good luck.
The hounds charged, and the Slayer went into action. These minions were much more of a challenge than Velvette's cannon fodder, but the Slayer still made quick work of the machines. When the last Robo-Hound was disassembled, the Slayer proceeded through the door to make his way to Vox's lair. Charlie got up from the railing she leaned on and was about to follow him, but she stopped when something caught her ear. She looked back into the penthouse. Valentino flew through the broken window of his penthouse. When he landed, he fell to his knees and panted with exhaustion. He was hurt badly, with gashing wounds all over his body. His hat was missing, and his pair of heart-shaped glasses were damaged. After several pants, Val looked up to see Charlie standing several paces in front of him.
Not quite the show you were expecting, is it? Or at least not the outcome you'd have hoped for.
Val took a deep breath, and he slowly got to his feet.
You know, this could have been easily avoided. Now, you have this whole mess to clean up and one less V to your name. Just one tiny alteration and I would have been fine with that.
Val glanced through the hole in the wall to the studio. Though it was doubtful he could see Velvette's corpse from where he stood, he knew what Charlie meant by one less V. But rather than show remorse, Val instead gritted his teeth and narrowed his eyes. He took off his broken glasses and discarded them onto the floor.
And force me to water down the quality of my art? I don't think so.
He took a step to his right. She did the same. Soon, both he and Charlie started to circle each other around the room. As they did, Valentino suddenly chuckled. A sadistic grin emerged on his face, along with a predatory gaze that fell onto Charlie.
You know what? I actually miss the naive and clumsy princess who nearly burned down my studio several weeks ago. It's given me an idea for a role you would have been perfect for. The slippery schoolgirl. Truly would have been one of my masterpieces.
To Val's surprise, Charlie barely reacted to his insinuation. Not even a flinch or a wince. She kept a sharp gaze on Val as they continued to circle each other.
So, spill the tea. What happened to that sweet little girl I miss so much? Did she die when she came face to face with that human?
In a way. One night a week ago I couldn't sleep, so I decided to take a walk. On my way back, a portal appeared out of nowhere and I fell through it. I found myself in a new hell. A hell from another universe. His universe.
Intriguing. Please indulge my curiosity.
It turns out his hell was far more ruthless. The demons are nothing more than husks of sinners' bodies transformed into pure monsters once their souls are extracted. There is no reasoning with those demons. They wanted to kill me, and I had no choice but to kill them. I had to learn to fight if I was to survive. Eventually, I met him, the Doomslayer. Together, we slew countless demons to save his Earth from the invasion from hell. When it was done, his people were able to get me back home.
Ah, I see. And what did all that bloodshed teach you?
That when push comes to shove, you can't be complacent if you are to keep what's important to you safe. So that's why I'm here. To ensure the safety of my guests, no matter the circumstances.
And you call upon your lapdog to do your dirty work instead of taking on the 3 overlords yourself. Such a shame. I would have loved to know what the slippery schoolgirl was capable of against a true overlord of hell.
Like I said, he insisted on coming along for this, but...
She stopped pacing, and Val did in turn.
If you truly want to face off against the Princess of Hell, I shouldn't deny you the opportunity.
She brought up her left arm, ironically the one Valentino licked during their first meeting. She pulled back her sleeve to reveal a metallic bracelet on her wrist. In the center of it was a glowing red gemstone. She balled her hand into a fist. Her eyes burned red, her hair waved behind her, and her horns emerged. She closed her eyes, and a burst of red energy blew out of the gem and engulfed her. Val brought up his hand to shield his eyes from the light and the blast of air. When he brought his hand down, he saw something rather unexpected.
Whoa.
Charlie's red business suit was gone. Now, she was wearing what could only be described as a futuristic gladiator outfit. On her hips was a metal belt that supported a skirt made of heavy cloth that reached halfway down her thighs. On her feet, 2 metal boots. Her belly was bare, while her upper chest was covered by a metal breastplate. On her left hand was a metal gauntlet that bore the same red gemstone of her bracelet. Her hair was braided and hung behind her. At the top of her head was a metallic circlet that encircled her horns, and all her armor was made of the same metal as the Doomslayer's armor. Not only that, but Charlie's exposed abs, legs, and arms showed off toned muscles you would see on an Olympic athlete. With their transformation complete, Charlie's burning red eyes beamed at Valentino.
So, are you just going to stand there and admire the view?
She held her right arm behind her, and in a flash of flames, a weapon appeared in her hand. A trident. She twirled the trident and then took her stance with her weapon pointed menacingly at Valentino.
Or are we going to fight?
Floor by floor, the Slayer proceeded down the building, wrecking every robohound that got in his way and causing a lot of property damage. Luckily, all the employees within the tower evacuated when the fighting started. Eventually, the Slayer made it to the lobby. After wrecking a final pack of robo-hounds, he saw a wall with a full-body poster of Vox on it slide open. The Slayer walked over to the open passage and peered into the black abyss below. He stepped off the ledge and fell through the darkness. He stood up to see only pitch black around him, but the darkness receded when the lights of hundreds of television screens on the large wall was turned on. On the wall to his left, Vox's face appeared and looked down at him.
Welcome to my humble lair, Mr. Doomslayer. You should feel honored. No other souls besides the V's are ever allowed here.
Vox's face disappeared, then reappeared on the Slayer's right.
Smile for the camera, because all of hell's eyes are on you.
Several screens changed to show the official broadcast of the event. It showed the Slayer standing in the middle of Vox's lair.
But you won't be the star for long.
The screens all went black. Then a single spotlight tore through the darkness. There, standing atop a small flight of steps, was the Overlord. He pointed directly at the Slayer in a dramatic pose.
Because the script demands a dramatic death for the finale. And since I am the director of this show, I have chosen you to fulfill that role.
He morphed into his electrical form and teleported into his command chair behind him.
So, let's get this show started!
His body surged with electricity. The bolts surged into cables that ran all around the room. Trapdoors opened, and a large pack of 24 robohounds emerged. Most were the size of the ones the Slayer fought before, while others were much larger, about the size of the Hell Knights of his universe. The Slayer took his stance, and the pack moved in on him. On his way down, the packs the Slayer encountered were sparse, so it was easy to take them out one by one. But here, the larger number of enemies coming at him all at once made it a little harder to manage. But from his history of conflict, this wasn't anything new to him. He dashed out of the way as 3 hounds pounced at him at the same time. He took care of them with a single blood punch that reduced them to scrap. He pulled out his heavy cannon and took care of a gunner with a precision bolt to the head. Another pounced from behind him, but he parried his claws with his blade, and with his other hand, pulled out his super shotgun and bisected the machine with a point-blank blast to the gut. The Slayer maneuvered his way through a crowd of machines until 5 of them were bunched together. He then launched his ice grenade and froze them. He then brought out his sentinel hammer and slammed it into the ground, causing each frozen enemy to shatter into a million pieces. The last remaining robohound was a larger one. It ran in and swiped its claws at the Slayer. He dashed out of the way and pulled out his ballista to unload a shot into the beast's head. The robot flinched, but recovered quickly. But the Slayer followed up the attack with a super shotgun blast. Before the robot could recover from that, the Slayer took a hold of the robot's arm and used his blade to sever it from the elbow. With all his strength, he took the severed arm and embedded the claw right through the head of the hound. With the last robohound dealt with, the Slayer brought out his rocket launcher and unleashed a trio of explosives right at Vox. But to the Slayer's surprise, none of the rockets reached their target.
You think I wouldn't have thought of every safety precaution for my own lair? What you're seeing here is a state-of-the-art energy force field. No physical projectile can penetrate it, not even angelic weapons. So I suppose you'll just have to...
The Doomslayer pelted the force field with his plasma rifle until it overloaded 3 seconds later. The surge of energy coursed through Vox's body, causing him to flounder in his chair. By the time Vox managed to get the power surge under control, the Slayer was already on top of him. The Slayer's blade plunged right into Vox's chest. Vox groaned in pain before he surged with electricity to force the blade out and push the Slayer away from him. When the Slayer skidded to a stop, he looked up to see Vox hunched over, clasping his wound.
Fine. Since you're so eager, I'll just have to cancel this show myself.
He got back into his chair, and the force field re-emerged around him. A surge of electricity flowed around the room. The Slayer quickly hopped onto one of the mangled wrecks of the larger robo-hounds right before the entire floor became electrified. The Slayer knew there wasn't going to be enough room to maneuver if Vox was able to attack again. The Slayer looked up at the ceiling and got an idea. He brought out his rocket launcher and fired a single rocket at a girder holding up several lights. The Slayer leapt off the hound wreck just as a bolt of Vox's lightning struck it. The Slayer landed on the girder and ran across it as more balls slammed around him. The Slayer managed to bring out his plasma rifle again and started to unload his shots at Vox's force field. But the Slayer didn't manage to pop the barrier because Vox stopped the floor shock for more of his robo-hounds to emerge and go after him. The Slayer stopped his attack and switched his attention to the new wave of fodder to take care of. His plasma rifle turned out to be an effective tool against the robo-hounds. Several hits of plasma caused them to overload and pop, all the while the heat built up within his weapon. The Slayer kept dealing with Vox's minions, all the while evading Vox's lightning bolts, which also led to moments of friendly fire. The Slayer saw Vox was going to electrify the floor again. He was too far away from the safety of the girder, but he had another idea. The Slayer leapt off the head of one of the charging robo-hounds like a springboard, just as the floor was electrified again. The Slayer brought out his super shotgun and launched his meat hook at one of the hanging lights on the ceiling. He swung on the chain before it dislodged, sending him on a collision course with Vox.
Uh-oh.
Before Vox could retaliate, the Slayer was close enough and released a heat blast from his plasma rifle that burst the force field wide open. This time, the Slayer grabbed Vox by the throat, and with his other hand, he landed a heavy punch that smashed Vox's screen. Before the Slayer could punch him again, Vox unleashed another surge of electricity and pushed the Slayer away. When the Slayer looked up this time, the flickering expression on Vox's broken screen said it all. Enough! He erupted into an explosion of electricity. Lengths of cable burst out from the floor and snaked their way towards him. Screens around the room were pulled from the walls and attached to the massive cables. They all combined and morphed around the Overlord. The final product was a larger, but more mangled and abominable version of himself. His face appeared on a misaligned set of TVs, while the cables formed into a mangled scrap body with a pair of scrap metal claws for hands. He was about the size of the cyber demon the Slayer faced near the beginning of his crusade in his world.
This show is over, you little parasite!
Vox lurched forward and swung his massive claw at the Slayer. He of course evaded it with ease. Vox followed it up with a torrent of electricity, but once again, the Slayer evaded it. In response, the Slayer unleashed a salvo of rockets that hit the Overlord, peeling away a layer of metal from his body. Vox tried to hit the Slayer again with another set of swipe attacks and electrical blasts. But once again, the Slayer kept evading the attacks and unleashed his arsenal of grenades, rockets, ballista bolts, and even a torrent of bullets from the Slayer's chain gun. Even when Vox sent a final wave of his remaining robo-hounds to distract him, the Slayer cut through them and evaded his attacks. The constant barrage the Slayer inflicted on Vox's body started to take its toll. Though he was a machine, Vox could feel the pain, and that pain led to anger that overwhelmed him. He ignited his claws with electricity and slammed them into the floor, electrifying the whole room. But this would prove to be a critical error. The Slayer had already pulled out his super shotgun and launched his beat hook at the vulnerable Overlord. By the time Vox realized what happened, the Slayer had landed onto his shoulder and pulled out his chainsaw. Vox's entire arm was cut off, causing him to clasp the stump. While he bellowed in pain, he left himself open for another attack. This time, the Slayer unleashed a volley of micro-missiles at Vox's leg. Vox collapsed to the ground, using his only remaining arm to prop himself up. But he didn't get a chance to recover, as when he looked up, he felt something stick to the center of his screens. The arrow blast from the Slayer's ballista shattered all of Vox's screens. He was blinded, and he fell face first into the floor. He tried to get up, but only managed to prop his body up on his remaining arm's elbow. Before he could do anything else, Vox felt something flow into his chest. The Slayer had switched his plasma rifle to the microwave beam attachment. The beam flowed right into Vox's weakened chest, stunning his entire body. The amount of energy grew and grew until it was too much for the Overlord to handle. When the dust cleared, the Overlord's final form was gone, leaving a scattered pile of scrap and cables everywhere. The Slayer put his weapon away and strolled through the debris to see what lay in the center of it. Vox laid on his back in his regular form. Pieces of sparking cables were jutting out of gaping wounds all over his body. His face was flickering on his screen with the same cracks the Slayer gave him before his transformation. All the while, surges of electricity caused him to twitch sporadically. When the Slayer stood over him, the face on the glitching screen showed the same thing Velvette's face showed in her final moments. Fear. The Slayer looked up to see one of the remaining functional TVs still broadcasting the event. It showed the Slayer standing over Vox's frail body, but the angle was offset. The Slayer then looked over to see a still functional camera on a jutting steel beam. He walked over to the camera and adjusted it to show a clear view of Vox. He walked back to stand over the Overlord again. He reached behind him and showed the camera a second coin. He dropped it on top of Vox's body. A second later, it vanished, and a wave of gentle energy brushed over Vox. With the Overlord now vulnerable, the Slayer pulled out his shotgun, but instead of the grenade launcher attachment, he slipped the automatic tri-barrel on. With his victim and his weapon in clear frame of the camera, the Slayer readied the revolving barrels and aimed it directly at Vox's chest.
No!
My. Quite the showman, this human. He certainly takes pride in his work, though it's quite a shame to see dear Vox come to an end so soon. It'll be quite a boring endeavor to speak to my listeners now that there's no more competition.
Everyone else in the hotel lobby only stared at the static screen in bewilderment. After 5 more seconds of silence, it was broken when Angel felt a nudge on his shoulder.
Hey, only one overload left and you get your freedom. How does that make you feel?
What could Angel say? Less than an hour ago, he was lying on his bed trying to recover from one of the worst days of his afterlife so far. But now, 2 of the 3 overlords of the largest media empire of hell were wiped out of existence. All that was left was the one who owned his soul. If the Doomslayer could defeat the other Vs with so much ease, then Valentino would surely drop like the fly he was when the Slayer faced him one-on-one. Angel's mind sparked. The broadcast showed the fight between Vox and the Slayer, but there was no word on where Val was or even...
Charlie. Vaggie, change the channel to 666.
Vaggie picked up the remote and did just that.
For those of you just joining us, I'm Katie Killjoy, and this is Tom Trench. With the unbelievable demise of Overlord Vox and his broadcast, we'll take care of the coverage of this unprecedented event going forward. We are now going live with our eyes in the sky to see what is happening now at V Tower.
The screen changed to a bird's eye view of the tower from a helicopter, with a female center reporter sitting to the left of the frame.
Thank you, Katie. While the Slayer was battling Voxers in the building's basement, we had a sighting of Overlord Valentino flying back into the building. I repeat, Valentino is still alive!
The screen briefly changed to a reel of the Moth Demon flying back into the building.
However, we haven't been able to get a clear image of what has been happening within the building, but it is reported there are flashes and noises coming from within the building. We can assume that Charlie Morningstar may be in conflict with Valentino. Wait, hold on. There seems to be something coming from within the building. It looks to be a glowing aura of some kind. It might be... Uh-oh! Hold on to something!
The camera shook out of focus as a distant explosion caused the chopper to shake. When the chopper got its bearings, the camera readjusted to see what happened.
Satan's balls! Are you getting this? Are you seeing this right now?
Vaggie got up from the couch and picked up her spear.
Al, get me over there.
You mean bring you into the heat of battle?
Obviously! Charlie's in danger and I have to help her.
Miss Morningstar didn't inform anyone in this hotel of her intentions today, so I would assume that she doesn't want anyone else besides her human companion to get involved in this conflict.
Seriously? Ugh.
She was about to run out the door, but Alastor continued.
However, I wouldn't pass up the opportunity to see the conclusion of this battle in the flesh. Give me your hand and we shall depart.
Wait, I'm coming with you.
What? No, it's too dangerous. If you were there, Val could use you as a shield.
But I can't just sit here when Charlie's in danger. I'm the reason this is happening.
Al, let's go.
Wait!
Too late. Angel watched as Alastor and Vaggie morphed into a black shadow that quickly flowed across the ground and exited the hotel under the main doors.
Fuck!
Angel ran across the lobby to the front doors.
Where are you going?
You damn well know where.
Shit.
Husk got up from the couch and went after him.
So, are you just going to stand there and admire the view? Or are we going to fight?
Valentino did in fact admire the view, but he managed to put his desire aside to focus on his task.
A shame Vox has his cameras focused on his duel with your lapdog. Because all of hell would certainly get a kick out of what I have planned for you.
During their circling, Val ended up standing next to an undamaged cabinet. He opened a drawer and pulled out a bag filled with pink powder. He opened it and threw all of its contents into his face. His body convulsed as the mystery drug entered his system. His muscles tightened, his wound stopped bleeding, and he smiled with the obsessive gaze of a predator locked onto Charlie.
Careful now, princess. Because Daddy isn't here to save you.
In a swift motion, Val opened another door of the cabinet and pulled out 2 Carmine Tommy guns. To Val's surprise, none of his bullets even touched Charlie. Emanating from her gauntlet was a massive energy shield that blocked every single one of them. When it disappeared back into her wrist, Charlie suddenly closed the distance between her and Val in a sudden burst of speed. Valentino stumbled back and clasped the fresh wound Charlie punctured into his chest.
Careful now, big boy, because your golden boy isn't here to act as your shield.
Val shot forward with his wings and swung his remaining free hands with razor-sharp claws at Charlie, forcing her to dash back. He fired another burst at Charlie, which she blocked, and she in turn charged at her opponent again.
Whoa!
This time, though, Val managed to dodge her attack. He extended his wings and unleashed a cloud of red smoke that blew in Charlie's direction. Charlie held up her gauntlet arm and made a rotating motion with her hand. A gust of air twirled in front of her and dissipated the cloud. As soon as it cleared, she brought her gauntlet hand to her trident. The gem glowed, and from the 3 prongs, a blast of energy shot from it, hitting Val square in the chest. He managed to recover fast enough to evade another of Charlie's lunges towards him. Val responded with another cloud of smoke, which Charlie evaded, and that was followed by another barrage of bullets which she blocked. What followed was a rhythmic dance between both opponents. Val got aggressive with his guns, claws, and smoke attacks, but Charlie was always faster and quicker on the draw. She blocked and evaded his attacks, and managed to get in several good hits with her trident and energy blasts. After seeing this dance was going nowhere, Val decided to play her way. He unleashed another smoke attack, which Charlie dissipated. She then lunged towards Val, but Val was ready for her. He parried the trident with his claw and grabbed a hold of the hilt. He then swiped at her with his free right claw. Charlie blocked it with the metal of her gauntlet, but Val managed to grab a hold of it. With her in a gridlock, Val took his chance and raised his remaining 2 arms to unload the remaining bullets in his guns into her vulnerable gut. A split second before he pulled the triggers, Charlie let go of her trident and spun herself out of the line of fire.
What?
Charlie twirled behind Val, managing to rip her arm free of his grip and grabbing a hold of the same arm with both of her hands. With all her strength, she punched his elbow and snapped his arm in half. While he reeled from the pain, Charlie managed to snatch her trident and tried to land a fatal blow onto her opponent. But Val managed to lift his wings and blow her away with a gust of air. When Charlie skidded to a stop, she looked up to see Val tending to his arm that hung uselessly by small threads of tendons at his elbow.
Oh, you bitch!
He brought up his free left hand and painfully ripped it off. Blood gushed from the open arm as he dropped the useless limb onto the floor. He panted from the pain before he sucked it up and regained his composure. He looked at Charlie with his signature sadistic grin and spoke with his unsettling chuckle accompanying it.
Tell me something, princess. If you somehow manage to make your pathetic little science project work and get more fools to join your little redemption cult, will you also go out to murder all of the other overlords who own their souls as well?
Only if they misbehave.
Val's response to her retort was a dark aura that emerged around him, along with more smoke. The mixture of smoke and darkness seeped into the floor. It flowed across the ground and surrounded Charlie. From the darkness, ghostly figures emerged with glowing red eyes and were draped in foul smoke. The first of Val's new minions attacked, and Charlie took care of it with a sweep of the feet and a stab through the chest. It disappeared in a puff. The next came along and Charlie disposed of it with a stab in the chest, followed by ripping its head off with her gauntlet hand. The others attacked and Charlie had little trouble dealing with them. But of course, they were a distraction. From the corner of her eye, she saw Val readying his Tommy guns with fresh magazines. She impaled the last minion and brought her shield up just in time to block the bullets. But Val didn't stop firing. Instead, another wave of minions emerged from the floor and closed in on her. She would have to do something to level the playing field soon. When the new minions closed in, she dropped her shield and quickly dashed out of their reach and out of Val's line of fire. Before he could get a beat on her, she took her trident and threw it right at him.
Whoa!
He managed to dodge it, and it stuck into the wall behind him. When he turned back to look at Charlie, though, he felt something wrap around his torso.
What?
Instead of the Slayer's meat hook, it was a whip. A whip of red energy that came out of Charlie's gauntlet. And with a powerful pull, Charlie launched herself towards Val. She landed a hard dropkick right on his face. He was launched across the room and crashed into another piece of furniture. When he got his bearings, he realized he had dropped his guns. He looked up to see Charlie picking them up from the floor. Val watched as Charlie channeled her energy and melted the barrels of the guns, making them useless. Val got up from the broken furniture, but before he could do anything else, he suddenly realized something. One of his teeth was missing, his golden tooth. When he looked up at Charlie again, he saw her holding it in her hand. She gave him a mocking glare before putting it in a small pouch on her belt. Val roared louder than he ever had before as he spread his wings and released a massive cloud of smoke that quickly filled the whole room. Charlie recalled her trident into her hand before twirling her gauntlet in a vertical motion. The gem glowed, and a wide magenta cyclone of air swirled around her, keeping the smoke at bay. The room grew darker as she stood in the middle of the safe zone with her weapon at the ready. She kept her eyes and ears open for any sign of her opponent in the abyss beyond. She waited and waited. Valentino emerged from the smoke and dove right at Charlie, but Charlie lifted her weapon and blocked Val's attack. He quickly retreated into the smoke and waited to attack again. Once again, Charlie managed to block him and he retreated. The third attack took a longer time to come, but when it did, Charlie was ahead of her opponent. She turned around and fired a blast from her trident and hit Val in midair. Val slammed into the floor, tumbling back into the smoke. Taking her chance, Charlie channeled her energy into her gauntlet and slammed her palm onto the floor. A blast of air blew away all the smoke filling the room. Charlie looked up to see Val getting up from the floor after his crash. Wasting no time, she swung her whip and caught Val in the chest again. She launched herself towards him and stabbed her trident directly into Val's right eye. Maintaining her momentum, she held onto her weapon and performed a pirouette over him. When her feet met the floor, she swung her trident forward, throwing Val over her head and launching him across the room. He crashed through the wall right next to the hole that led back into Velvette's studio. Charlie followed him through the new hole and dropped down to the floor below. Val lay on the ground right next to the bisected corpse of Velvette. He looked up to show his destroyed eye socket behind his hand. He tried to push himself up from the floor, but failed. Charlie took a firm grip of her weapon and walked towards him, ready to finish the job. The lights of the studio flickered, and the floor rumbled slightly. When she looked out the window, all the lights of Pentagram City flickered too. Charlie looked back at Valentino to see him on his knees now.
Seems like your friend is taking care of Vox. Shame he's gone. But what you never realized is that the three of us had a deal. If any of the V's were to die by anyone's hands but our own, the surviving members would agree upon how many souls each would inherit from them. And now that I'm the only V left, they all belong to me!
Uh-oh.
Charlie opened her eyes. She was kneeling with a firm grip on her trident, which was staked into the floor. When she stood up, she saw a huge change in the scenery. The entire top of the V's tower was gone. All that remained was piles of rubble and debris around what used to be Velvette's studio. When Charlie looked up at the sky, she saw the cause of this destruction. In the back of her mind, Charlie had wondered what Valentino's true demonic form would look like. And truth be told, she wasn't far off from what it was. He truly was a moth demon, with wide bug wings and a massive insectoid body that shared many similarities to that one creature from those Japanese monster movies in the living world. But what stood out was his face. You could tell it was Valentino's face, but far more monstrous. Like any semblance of his past human self was gone, and replaced with the monster he truly was. But this didn't faze Charlie in the slightest. She withdrew her weapon from the floor and prepared to face this monster head on. But she stopped when she heard something.
Mm-hmm.
A shadow emerged from the floor and morphed into two familiar figures.
Salutations, Miss Morningstar!
Charlie!
Vaggie?
Charlie looked up at Valentino. From the way he was hovering above the building, it looked like he hadn't seen her or the new arrivals yet due to the amount of debris they stood behind.
What are you doing here?
What do you think? I'm here to help you.
She took a firm grip of her spear and prepared to step out into the open to face the moth demon. But Charlie quickly held out her arm to stop her.
I'm sorry, Vaggie, for not telling you about this. But I can't put you in danger.
What? You can't possibly think of defeating that abomination by yourself.
I'm not. I have help.
As if on cue, a clanking sound emerged from behind them. They turned their attention to what remained of the elevator. A second later, the Slayer burst out from the door and landed in front of the trio. When he composed himself, Charlie looked over at Alastor.
Alastor, as the owner of the Hazbin Hotel, I command you to keep Vaggie out of harm's way until this conflict is resolved.
What?
Before she could say anything else, Alastor placed his hand on Vaggie's shoulder, and they both shifted into the shadows, away from the conflict.
Please forgive me, sweetie.
When Alastor and Vaggie emerged from the shadows, Vaggie frantically looked around to see they had arrived on the top of a nearby skyscraper.
What the fuck are you doing?
Why, honoring Miss Morningstar's request. It was as I expected that this conflict is only between her compatriot, and the remaining overlord she wishes to topple.
She looked out to see a good view of the V's tower only a few blocks away, with Valentino hovering above it. And when she looked close enough, she could see the shapes of Charlie and the Doomslayer on the destroyed rooftop. She turned around to make her way to the building's stairway, but she suddenly couldn't move after the third step.
What the?
Wrapped around her ankles were two black tendrils.
Now. You should trust your partner with her decisions.
Two more tendrils emerged and grabbed a hold of her wrists, while the fifth seized her spear. She struggled against the tendrils, but she was lifted off her feet and lowered into a newly summoned chair. When she was seated, the tendrils restrained her arms and legs.
comfortable?
Alastor sat down on his own newly summoned chair. He held up his hands, and a warm cup of tea and saucer appeared in them.
Just relax, my dear, and enjoy the finale of this marvelous show.
She stopped her struggling and accepted that she was going to have to watch this battle unfold without her involvement. Charlie looked up from behind the mound of rubble at the monster she and her partner were about to face.
Okay. Looks like the only way we can take him down is to hit him with everything we have until we have an opening to deal the final blow. You ready?
The Slayer held his ballista and confidently nodded.
Then let's do it.
They both emerged from the mound into the open. By the time Val noticed them, Charlie fired a blast from a trident into his eye. He shook his head and regained his bearings, but he was hit in the eye again with another blast, this time from the Slayer's ballista. Val retaliated by unleashing a caustic concoction of smoke and slime from his mouth. Charlie and the Slayer dispersed to opposite sides of the roof to evade the disgusting ooze. With them separated, Val turned his sights to Charlie first. He tucked his wings and dove right at her. Charlie dashed out of the way as Val tore a massive chunk out of the roof. Val pulled up and turned around, getting ready for a second dive. But he was met by a torrent of bullets that came from the Slayer's mobile turret. In response, Val unleashed another caustic volley at the roof, which the Slayer evaded. When Val dove at him, the Slayer jumped through the hole Val made earlier to the floor below. When Val swooped up to prepare another dive, Charlie channeled her energy into her trident. Instead of a single blast, 3 orbs of energy appeared on the prongs of her weapon. A second later, they launched and homed in on Val like the Slayer's rockets. And those were followed up by another volley of rockets that came from the Slayer a floor below. When Val finished thrashing in pain, Charlie saw that a chunk of his jaw was missing, leaving a gap between his lower row of teeth. Val splayed his wings, and from all around him, dozens of smaller smoke moths emerged. And by small, he meant smaller than Val, but just as large as Charlie's body. The moth screeched and dove towards her and the Slayer. Charlie brought up her shield, and each of the kamikaze moths detonated with no damage inflicted on her. Meanwhile, the Slayer managed to shoot down every moth sent his way before they even touched him. Of course, this was once again a distraction. Val dove at Charlie again. She jumped into the air, barely managing to evade Val's attack. She landed next to the Slayer, who gave her a pat on the shoulder, which she replied with a quick nod. They both looked up at Val, who readied himself for another attack. In response, Charlie unleashed a stream of small energy projectiles, accompanied by the stream of bullets from the Slayer's mobile turret. Valentino roared in pain from the constant barrage being unloaded into him. In response, he opened his wings and pockets of smoke emerged. But instead of the suicide moths, these puffs of smoke landed around the duo and morphed into Val's smoke minions.
Keep your attention on him. I'll keep them off you.
Charlie did as she said she would. She cut through every single one of Val's smoke minions, while the Slayer kept up the barrage of bullets, rockets, and ballista blasts at the moth demon. Val roared in irritated anger and pain. He kept attacking his opponents with his vomit, dives, and minions again and again, but the duo still made a mockery of him, coming out untouched, all the while tearing apart his demonic body piece by piece. His wings were punctured with many holes, the meat on his arms were shredded, and gaping wounds across his chest bled with his gooey inside spilling out. At this point, Val had enough. He roared the loudest he ever did, and dove again. But he didn't aim at his opponents. Instead, he aimed several floors down. He crashed into the side of the building. The tower shook from the force, and continued to shake as Charlie and the Slayer felt Val tearing away at the structural integrity. Seconds later, the floor they stood on violently slanted. The top 4 floors of what remained of the tower started to slide off the structure. The Slayer and Charlie ran up the falling piece of the building. The Slayer managed to jump onto the new top floor as the piece of the building completely fell away. Charlie followed, but didn't make it in time. Yeah! She threw her whip out trying to grab a hold of the side of the building, but before the whip could take hold, something big emerged from the falling debris and collided with her. Charlie was sent spiraling up into the air without any sense of direction. The spinning stopped when she felt something big clasped around her waist. When her bearings came back, she realized what happened.
Uh-oh.
She was in the claws of Valentino. His eyes peered at her with an obsessive gaze and a broken sadistic grin on his face. From that look, Charlie knew he only had one thing on his mind: making her pay for all the trouble she caused him. He opened his broken mouth, displaying his row of razor-sharp teeth. She tried to free herself from Val's hand, but his grip was too tight. Val brought her towards his mouth, hell-bent on biting her in half. But suddenly, something landed on his long tongue. The arrow blast blew Val's tongue in two, causing him to roar in pain again. Relieved she wasn't going to be Val's snack anytime soon, Charlie looked up to see the Slayer leaping off the building and launching his meat hook right at Val's head. Before Val could react, the Slayer was on top of his head. He extended his blade and plunged it deep into Val's left eye. Val wailed in pain, causing him to loosen his grip on Charlie, allowing her to pry herself loose. She summoned her trident into her hand and plunged it into Val's wrist. She channeled her energy into the trident, and 2 seconds later, a burst of energy shot out of it and blew Val's hand clean off his wrist. In his pain, Val flung Charlie off his wrist into the air. Thankfully, she was flung towards the V's tower. She swung her whip and managed to pull herself to the safety of the half-destroyed building. When she climbed up to the ledge, she looked up to see the Slayer giving Val a really hard time. He climbed over Val's head, dodging Val's hands and even shooting them away with his super shotgun. All the while inflicting immense damage into Val's head with his blade, his super shotgun, and even his chainsaw. Down below, Charlie's mind raced thinking about what to do next. They had weakened Val greatly, but he still had some fight left in him. They needed to end this fight soon, lest it continued to cause more collateral damage. It was then that she noticed 2 things. Behind the holes in Val's chest was a dark glow.
The weak spot we need!
The second thing she noticed was the damage the Slayer was inflicting on Val's head had exposed a part of his brain. She glanced at her trident, and an idea sparked into her head.
The method to exploit it.
She looked to her left and saw a ramp of rubble that could give her a good boost into the air. She took her trident and ran towards it while she screamed at the top of her lungs.
Final blow!
The Slayer looked up. When he saw Charlie running up the ramp, he knew what she meant. He leapt off Val's head into the air. Charlie jumped as hard as she could off the ramp with a little help of her powers to boost herself up. She pulled back her gauntlet and swung her whip towards the descending Slayer. He caught the whip in his hand, and with all the juice in his booster boots, twisted his body around and swung Charlie up with all his strength. Charlie rocketed through the air, straight at Val's head. Before Val could do anything, she brought her trident forward and slammed it right into Val's right eye. With her opponent blinded, Charlie climbed to the top of Val's head and plunged her trident right into Val's exposed brain. Val lifted his hands to swat Charlie off him, but Charlie channeled her energy into a weapon, and sparks of lightning surged into his brain. Val's hand stopped, and his entire body shook erratically. He flew away from the building, unable to control where he was going. With a small surge of lightning, Charlie pulled the trident up like a flight stick. And sure enough, Val's body reared back as if she was controlling him like a plane. Val shook his body around, fighting to regain control. But Charlie was able to fight back hard enough to steer Val back towards the V's tower. When they were close enough, Charlie saw the Slayer on the top floor, holding the weapon that would deal the final blow. She pushed her trident forward, causing Val to dive before pulling up and forcing him to fly up the side of the building. When they reached the top, Val was suspended in mid-air with his wings splayed open.
Shoot!
The Slayer pulled the trigger, and the BFG 9000 fired.
Charlie!
Vaggie watched as the Moth Demon's entire thorax was blown out, leaving only an empty cavity. His massive body went limp. It crashed into what was left of the V's tower, causing it to collapse into a massive pile of rubble below.
Will you just shut up and let me loose? The battle is over, so let me go!
Ooh. Of course, my dear.
Alastor stood up, and with a snap of his fingers, Vaggie's restraints were removed. The tendrils gently brought her onto her feet, and her spear was put back into her hand. Alastor then put his hand onto her shoulder, and they morphed into the shadows. They re-emerged at ground zero. Vaggie looked up at the massive pile of rubble that used to be the monument of the three most infamous overlords of hell.
Charlie!
No response. Vaggie frantically climbed over the rubble, looking for any signs of her girlfriend. The dust made it nearly impossible to see and caused her to cough between her panicked pants.
Charlie!
Still no response. She climbed further over the rubble. She was about to call out again, but another voice beat her to it.
Charlie!
Vaggie turned around to see angel dust emerge from another mound of rubble, with Husk not far behind him.
Vaggie? Vaggie, where's Charlie? Have you seen her?
Angel? What are you doing here? In fact, how did you get here?
Cab. Had to pay the driver triple to drive into the danger zone.
And you didn't even try to stop him?
Even if I did, he wasn't going to stop trying either way.
Vaggie, please. We saw the explosion as we pulled in. Charlie wasn't here when the building collapsed, right?
She was on top of the monster when the explosion happened.
No. No. Charlie!
Angel took the lead in climbing through the rubble, with the rest not far behind him.
Charlie! Where are you?
By the time he cleared another mound of rubble, the dust cleared enough for him to see a large steel beam laying on the ground. Angel was ready to shout again, but he heard something. It came from a gap under the steel beam. Someone was under there.
Charlie?
The only response was more rubble moving. Angel moved closer and kneeled to see who was in the hole. A hand shot out of the hole, causing Angel to fall backward onto his rear. He scampered backwards until he felt the hands of Vaggie and Husk grab him. Valentino was back in his regular form, and he was literally broken. His upper right arm was torn off from the elbow, meanwhile his lower left arm was missing its hand. His wings were completely shredded. His body was riddled with gashing wounds that spilled liters of his blood onto the debris he crawled over. His right eye was replaced by a gashing red hole. A chunk of his jaw was missing, leaving a gap in his lower row of razor-sharp teeth. He collapsed onto the bed of debris and coughed up a wad of blood. When he gathered enough strength, he lifted his head to see Angel looking at him along with the others. He lifted his shaking hand, pathetically reaching out to his golden boy. Angel! Something had landed between Val and the hotel residents. Val dropped his hand and looked up. It turned out that something was actually someone. Someone that turned out to be two someones. Standing over him was none other than Charlie Morningstar and the Doomslayer.
Charlie! Charlie!
Angel got to his feet and ran towards her along with Vaggie, but they stopped dead in their tracks when the Slayer turned around to face them. He held out his hand at the four hotel residents, silently telling them to stay put. After seeing what this killing machine was capable of, they all complied, but that didn't keep them from leaning to the side to see what was happening behind him. Charlie looked down at the broken overlord she and her partner brought down together. Her burning eyes peered into him. But to Val's surprise, her gaze wasn't followed by another strike on his helpless body. Instead, she held up her right hand, and a glowing parchment appeared in it.
Last chance. Release Angel Dust of his contract and sign this restraining order agreeing not to come within a mile of him or the Hazbin Hotel. Do this, and you may have a chance to rebuild your reputation as an overlord of hell.
Valentino stared at the parchment before he tucked his head and coughed up another wad of blood. To think only an hour ago, he was sitting at the top of his tower in the underworld, with his two partners in crime by his side. Now, his partners were gone, and he was bleeding out on top of the ruins of what used to be the high castle he ruled from. He was bested by the Princess of Hell, humiliated, and now she was giving him the choice to humiliate himself even further by surrendering his crown jewel. Valentino lifted his head to look at the parchment. He brought up his functional left arm and reached for it. Was this it? Was this how the great Valentino would be defeated? Charlie knelt for him to take it from her hand. Instead of taking the paper, Valentino grabbed Charlie's wrist. In a burst of speed, Val got to his feet and withdrew a concealed angelic dagger from behind him. Val looked down to see the dagger inches from Charlie's exposed torso, along with Charlie's gauntlet clasped to his wrist, holding it in place. He lifted his gaze to Charlie's eyes, looking straight up at him. It was at this moment that he knew. He fucked up.
Very well.
Val received a hard knee to the gut, followed by a twist of his dagger arm, before receiving a hard fist to the elbow from Charlie's freed right hand. The dagger popped into the air. Charlie grabbed it, and in one fluid motion, she spun around and plunged the dagger into the last vulnerable part of Valentino's broken body. It wasn't his heart that was pierced. Instead, Val fell to his knees, and his last functioning hand clasped what remained of his crotch. Valentino hunched over, all the while whimpering the most pathetic sound Charlie had ever heard in her entire existence. She only stared at the castrated overlord. Unlike the times she felt sorry for whoever she came across when they were hurting, Charlie felt no sympathy or remorse for this pathetic excuse of a soul. Charlie looked to her right to see the Slayer standing next to her. He held out his hand, and resting in his palm was the third coin. She picked it up, and the Slayer gave her a nod before he stepped away. She looked down at the Overlord and grabbed a hold of his shoulder with her right hand. Because of how tall Val was, she didn't need to crouch. She pulled him up to eye level. Her gaze peered into his remaining eye that was swollen from the pathetic tears he shed. Like the faces of the other V's moments before their execution from the Slayer, his eyes showed an undisputed sign of fear.
You may not believe me, but I still believe souls in hell can be redeemed.
She held up her gauntlet, allowing him to see the coin.
But after the ordeals I've endured to get back home, I've learned there's an important word that belongs in that statement.
The coin dissipated, and the energy enveloped her hand.
Some. Not all. She shot her hand right into Valentino's chest. When she pulled it out, a massive hole was left in the middle of it. Val's body lurched and twitched, his throat choking on what remained of his blood. Charlie brought up her hand for him to see the very thing he never had. Val's body shuddered. The effects of the token had begun to kick in. A wave of numbness slowly enveloped his body. He looked one last time into the burning eyes of the girl who bested him. They were the last thing he saw as darkness enveloped him. All semblance of his soul faded away. A silence befell the remains of the V's tower. No one made a sound. Not Charlie, the Slayer, the 4 hotel residents, or even the onlookers who stood at the edge of the ruins. The only sound that could be heard was the news helicopter up above. Suddenly, Charlie felt Valentino's heart vibrate in her hand. It dissolved into a red ball of energy and then morphed into a long glowing parchment. She looked at what was written on it. Names. Names of the souls Valentino and the other V's had owned. She skimmed through the names until she found the one she was looking for. Anthony. She glanced at Angel Dust. He was still reeling from what happened, but a second later, he grimaced when a pink collar and chain appeared around his neck. The chain extended all the way to Charlie's hand, where it rested under her thumb holding the parchment. She closed her eyes, and the gem of her gauntlet glowed. The energy flowed out of her palm and incinerated the whole parchment. The chain under her thumb started to break. She let go of the chain as segment after segment broke one by one, all the way up to Angel's collar, which then shattered into 100 harmless pieces.
As Vaggie and Husk tended to Angel, Charlie noticed the Slayer standing next to her. From the vague view of his face through his visor, Charlie could see a small, minuscule shape of a smirk in the corner of his mouth. He held up his fist before her. She brought up her fist and bumped it with his before they pulled them back with their fingers wiggling.
Good job.
The Slayer nodded back as a silent, "You too." Just then, a portal emerged behind the Slayer. With their mission accomplished, it was time for the Slayer to head home.
Oh, before you go, I have something for you.
Charlie reached behind her and pulled something out of her pouch. It was Valentino's golden tooth. The Slayer held out his hand, and Charlie dropped it into his open palm. He closed his hand on it and gave Charlie one final look. She nodded her head.
Thank you, Doom Guy. I'll be in touch if I need any more help.
Doom Guy returned the nod and turned around to proceed through the portal.
Until next time.
All right, Missy.
Charlie felt a hand clasp her shoulder and turn her around to face her girlfriend.
You have a lot of explaining to do. Just what the hell happened that night a week ago?
It's a long story, but the summary is I ended up in a hell from another dimension and I fought my way through to get back home.
Vaggie looked down at Charlie's attire. She glanced over at the spot where Doom Guy left through the portal.
While making a rather dangerous friend along the way?
Essentially.
And all that happened in just the span of less than 6 hours?
Charlie shook her head.
Try a little over a week.
What?
Time moves differently between our worlds, but after my adventure, the people Doom Guy worked with were able to teleport me back, along with synchronizing the timelines. Now a minute here is a minute over there. It's a lot of science and magic talk that I couldn't fully understand.
As ludicrous as that all sounds, I strangely believe you. But why didn't you tell us about any of that?
Because it wasn't relevant to our work at the hotel.
Well, it certainly feels relevant now. Just what the hell were you thinking going out to fight 3 overlords by yourself?
Well, technically I didn't do it alone, but to answer your question, you did say I should show more authority as Princess of Hell, so I did.
Evidently. Just tell me when you plan to go out to intimidate and or murder more overlords in the future. And don't cut me out of it again when things get bad. Promise?
I promise, sweetie.
Charlie's promise was accompanied by a small kiss that she gave to her girlfriend. Vaggie couldn't be too mad after that. The girls turned their attention to Angel Dust. He stood over the corpse of Valentino. Husk stood behind him, giving him ample space. Charlie and everyone else could only imagine what was going on in Angel's head.
Angel?
Angel turned his attention to Charlie, who stood next to him. Angel fell to his knees and clasped himself to Charlie. Charlie gently rubbed her hands on his back and the back of his head, all the while humming a gentle tune. Angel continued to cry for a full minute until he was able to calm himself down enough to speak.
Oh, Charlie, I'm so sorry.
For what?
Everything. Not taking your seminar seriously and sneaking out to get high and fighting turf wars with Jerry and especially when I embarrassed you on the news. God, what an absolute fuck I am.
Angel, that was months ago. I've already forgiven you for that.
Yeah, well, after what happened here, it feels like that all happened yesterday. So please bear with me that I feel the need to apologize again.
He lifted his head from her shoulder and looked into her eyes. She returned his gaze with a warm smile.
Well, if you believe you need to apologize again, then I forgive you again.
A small grin emerged on Angel's face, but it quickly disappeared when his eyes fell onto Charlie's outfit. He looked over at Valentino for a moment, then looked back at Charlie with an uneasy look on his face.
What is it, Angel?
Now, don't get me wrong. I'm so eternally grateful that you gave that dirty, rotten motherfucker exactly what he deserved. But a part of me wishes you didn't do this.
What? What are you talking about?
Charlie, I didn't yell at you to leave the studio to get Val to stop hurting me. I wanted you to leave because I didn't want him to hurt you.
What?
I know it sounds crazy after what you did here, but at the time, I knew what Valentino was capable of, and if he did something to you, I don't think I could ever forgive myself. You are literally the only shining light in this shithole. I know I said time and time again that you're just naive and delusional, but that's part of your charm. That optimism and cheeriness to a fault? I never would admit it, but I envied you sometimes. To have that sense of joy again, I felt like I had none left.
He glanced down at Charlie's outfit again.
But now, I'm afraid whether that sweet girl is still in there or not. Please, Charlie. Please tell me if that sweet and kind girl is still in there.
Angel, I really appreciate what you said to me, but what happened to me? You had nothing to do with it. I ended up lost in the Doomslayer's realm, and I had to fight through it to get back home. And during that journey, you could say I grew up in a way.
Oh, you mean by becoming a killer?
Unfortunately, yes. But I learned I can't solve every problem by being nice and happy all the time. That's how Valentino won the first time. The only way to defeat him was to stand up to him and have the will to follow through with my intentions. To protect you and the hotel, even if it meant ending him and his partners.
Not
all.
Well, I can understand your new outlook on everything. But I just hope you don't stray too far and lose sight of what your mission is. It would hurt me more than all the suffering I've endured here, seeing you become something like him.
I will admit the thought did cross my mind several times on my adventure and even tonight. But perhaps there's a way to keep me from falling too far.
And what's that?
A reminder of what I'm doing this for.
She placed her hand onto Angel's shoulder. He felt himself blush, not in the way Husk did when they had their moments, but more in the way when a little sister supported her big brother.
Well, I do owe you big time now, so...
He held up his right hand like he was taking an oath.
For murdering Valentino and freeing me of my eternal torment, I swear upon my useless soul to take your session seriously from now on. Scout's honor.
Thank you, Angel. You're sweet.
I don't see any crossed fingers on any hands, so that's a good sign. Still, a new contract would be the safest bet.
It's okay, I believe you, Angel.
Angel replied with a grateful grin. He leaned in and gave her another hug.
Thank you, Charlie.
You're welcome, Angel.
When they got to their feet, the 5 hotel residents looked out to the edge of the rubble to see the crowd of onlookers had grown and were cautiously creeping closer. They even saw that reporters and cameramen had joined the crowd.
We'd better head back before we get overwhelmed by the press.
Good point. I don't have much energy left after that ordeal. Time to go home and get some well-deserved rest, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely.
Al, if you would.
As you wish, Miss Morningstar.
Alastor raised his hand, and a dark shadow enveloped the residence before they morphed away, back to the Hazbin Hotel.
Stay tuned later tonight as we've got another exclusive interview with the Princess of Hell herself, Charlie Morningstar. We'll discuss what drove her to go out of her way to murder overlords Valentino, Fox, and Velvette, as well as potentially get answers to the burning questions everyone has about her mysterious human accomplice. Here's hoping this interview will be just as entertaining as the last one. Don't you agree, Tom?
Absolutely. After what she did yesterday, I think she's finally grown a set of balls to finally display her authority as the Princess of Hell. Perhaps this means she can be taken seriously for once.
We'll get our answers later tonight, so remember to tune in at 6 here on channel 666. And in related news, due to the recent death of Overlord Valentino at the hands of Princess Morningstar, the King of Lust himself, Asmodeus, has expressed interest in acquiring all previously owned assets by the deceased Overlord to expand his business into the Pride Ring. Our reporter was there to see what he had to say.
Though it was tragic to see an overlord such as Valentino perish. Well, it really wasn't, because Valentino was always a horrible piece of shit. But regardless, I believe there's a golden opportunity to fill the lustful void left open thanks to Miss Morningstar's escapades. I'll be sure to give the sinners of the Pride Ring a good taste of what pleasures we have down here in the Lust Ring. I'm very confident they will love it. And Angel Dust, if you're watching this and you're not serious about this whole redemption business, I'd like to offer you a position to become my new star. Don't worry, it won't require a soul contract or anything like that. I'll be sure to treat you right.
Quite the turn of events that has happened thanks to the actions of Miss Morningstar and her mysterious compatriot. On behalf of everyone here at 666 News, I'm Katie Killjoy, and we'll see you tonight at 6 o'clock.